Hey bourbon fans, I'm Tim the Suburban Dad, here to help you dads find some great bourbon. Recently I went on a trip to Nashville, Tennessee, and I did not only some vacationing, but some bourbon hunting, and I got to tour a distillery down there. Now I was on the outskirts of Nashville out north called Hendersonville. The bourbon scene there was not bad at all, nothing too crazy. I was able to find this guy right here. Stay tuned for a review on that one. John J. Bowman's Single Barrel. I also got to tour the Nelson Green Brier Distillery. I only ever knew of Nelson Green Brier because of seeing their bottle of Tennessee whiskey on the shelves here in St. Louis. Never really thought much about it, just one of those bottles that I pass up all the time. I realized that it was very close to where we'd be in Tennessee, so I thought, hey, why not? Turns out they've got a very interesting legacy and history. Started with Charles Nelson, the founder, who was born in 1835 back in Germany. He and his family moved across the ocean to New York City. His father had sold their family business of candle making, soap making back in Germany, and sewed all the gold from that sale into his clothes. And when there was a storm at sea, he got knocked overboard and sank because of the weight. Tragic. So now Charles, only 15 at the time, was the head of the family. Once in New York, he started doing what he knew best, making candles and soap. Eventually, he saved up a little bit of money and moved out to Cincinnati, Ohio, around age 17. At that point, he switched gears a little bit, became a butcher, and through his association with some of the other craftsmen, he got to learn the art of making whiskey. So eventually, he moved down to Nashville, Tennessee. He opened a grocery store, and it thrived on the sales of coffee as well as meat, naturally, and whiskey. Now, in terms of coffee, there's rumor that he sold or brought his coffee to the Maxwell Hotel and later became the Maxwell House coffee brand, good to the last drop. His whiskey became so popular that he stopped the grocery store side of things and focused strictly on whiskey. He bought the distillery that his whiskey was being made from, and he increased production and really ramped up the scale, and it became famous from Florida all the way to California. It was sold in Paris and Moscow and the Philippines. This is back in the late 1800s, folks. This is wild. One of the main reasons for his success was not only the quality of his product, but also the fact that he was one of the first ones to sell whiskey in a bottle, not just a jug or a barrel. So it was a lot easier to sell bottles than a huge jug or barrel. Plus, the bottles were clear. You could see the whiskey and get a better idea of what you're actually buying, so it helped his credibility as well. Charles died in 1891. The distillery was taken over by his wife, Louisa. But then in 1909, Tennessee instituted a statewide prohibition, which shut down their distillery. They did ship up some of their whiskey to Louisville for sale, but then the distillery did not continue. I also wanted to take a minute to talk about Into the AM Clothing Company. What? Hey man, you're supposed to talk about bourbon whiskey. I know, but as the channel's growing, progressing, I'm happy to partner with Into the AM, as you can see by this cool t-shirt, microphone not included. So they sell t-shirts and other clothing, but especially graphic tees. High quality stuff. The fit is great, super soft and comfortable. I really like it. I wouldn't promote something that I didn't approve of myself. What does this have to do with you? You get 10% off using the code BourbonDad10. I'll put the link in the description. So not only will you get some high quality clothing, but by using my link, you'll also be supporting the channel, and I'll be able to do even more cool stuff, get better bottles, be able to share them with you guys. So thank you in advance. Fast forward to 2006, Andy and Charlie Nelson, with their father, went to a butcher in Green Brier, Tennessee. Now, Charlie and Andy were the great-great-great-grandsons of Charles. And they had heard some rumors about the family business, that it was basically a moonshine operation. But little did they know that it really had a rich history. So when they were at this butcher shop, they discovered the old family distillery, which was right across the street. It was run down and in disrepair, but it really ignited a spark in them. They went to the local historical society and discovered that they had 2 perfectly preserved bottles of whiskey from back in the day, way, 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 way back in the day, which is amazing in and of itself. 3 years later, they got production going for Nelson Green Brier Distillery, and they actually began with Bell Mead. So the brand of Bell Mead comes from back in the days of Charles Nelson. He produced whiskey for a company called Sperry, Wade & Co. So they bought whiskey from him, slapped their label and brand on it, which was Bell Mead, and they sold it. So to kind of get things going, the Nelson brothers sourced whiskey and used the brand of Bell Mead to sell it. Nowadays, they produce their own Tennessee whiskey, which is Nelson Green Brier Tennessee Sour Mash Whiskey. They source their bourbons. Any of their bourbons or rye are sourced currently, but they do have some whiskey laid down of their own, so look forward to that. They have the Nelson Brothers Classic, which comes in at 93.3 proof and retails for 45 bucks. They have the Nelson Brothers Reserve, which is 107.8 proof, and it's $65. They have the Nelson Brothers Rye, which is 92.5 proof, and it is also $45. The last few years, they've really focused on finished whiskeys. So these finishes include Madeira, Cognac, Mourvedre, tell me in the comments how I'm supposed to say that, sherry, rum just this year, and honey. These finished barrels are 95 plus. The honey barrel is 200 bucks. I didn't try any of the finished ones at the distillery. I'm kind of over finished barrels at the moment. Plus, the fact that it's sourced, I didn't love that either. I understand they got to get things going. For the tasting, we got to try the Tennessee whiskey, the classic, the reserve, and the rye. And I was very pleasantly surprised that I liked the Tennessee whiskey the best. So the fact that that's the one that they're making and producing themselves gives me a lot of hope that their bourbon is also going to be really good stuff. So there you go. Nelson Green Brier Distillery. Who knew? Did you know that they also made Bell Mead? I didn't until recently. Pretty cool stuff. Definitely worth checking out if you're down in the Nashville area. So there you go. Always looking to share my bourbon and whiskey adventures with you guys. Have you ever tried any of Nelson Green Brier whiskey at all? What'd you think? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, cheers. He was one of the first people to sell whiskey in a jar. No. Nobody sells whiskeys in jars, you idiot. Just that crappy moonshine.